Well, it was real frosty out this morning, but today's the day that I chose to at least lay out the post diagram for the new chicken coop. I'm standing where the old chicken coop used to be, and this is really the footprint where it's going to end up. I've got my handy helper Travis with me, who said he'd rather not be on camera today. That's fine, but he didn't know enough about carpentry this morning to do this job by himself. Can you imagine a guy showing up for work and not knowing how to build a chicken coop? What are you, junior in high school? Junior in high school and doesn't know how to build a chicken coop. Well, guess what? I'm going on 59 years old and I don't know how to build a chicken coop, but I learned by looking on the internet. In fact, I've been studying chicken coops on backyardchickens.com. I've been studying how to frame a building and how to frame a deck on YouTube and at Lowe's.com and a lot of other websites. So today we're going to build a chicken coop layout by trial and error, and Travis is going to be here and he's going to learn right along with me. I'm sure we're going to make some mistakes, but part of this do-it-yourself project that we've been filming is because I guess there are a lot of you out there that are doing these kinds of projects and you don't know how to do them either. So you can learn from the things that I do right, you can learn from the things I do wrong, and by all means, whatever you do, put a comment with this video. Write something right down here below in the comment section. Go to my website, do something to add to my knowledge base. If I'm doing something wrong, tell me. The last thing I'd want to do is buy a bunch of chickens and then all of a sudden have them fly the coop. Well, trial and error today means that what we had to do is figure out how to get the building laid out in square, and we used this batter board method that you probably have heard about before. We basically measured off the front wall and made sure that it was lined up with the front of the building behind me. That was our starting point, and then we started measuring the 12 by 16 floor that we're going to put in. We put in batter boards and stretch strings. There's a little bit of moving around to get that square, but we finally did get it square, and now it's time to put the holes in the ground to set my posts. Now, I know a lot of you probably pour sonotubes and pour concrete level to the top of the ground, sit your posts on top of the concrete. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to bury mine in the ground. They say direct bury on the new treated lumber is about 20 years. I don't think I'm going to be worried about a chicken coop 20 years from now. I think I'm going to be worried more about my health and other things, but somebody else might come along and say, hey, that coop needs to be repaired. That's fine with me. Let them repair it. In the meantime, we're going to punch the holes in the ground. I'm very, very fortunate. I've got a good friend and a neighbor who's done a lot of work for me in the past, and he's got a great piece of equipment you're going to see working. He's going to drill these holes like nothing. I wouldn't want to be out here with post hole diggers today, wearing my shoulders out and probably not doing as good a job as he can do. So we're going to punch the holes in the ground, then we'll get to setting the posts. Well, it's another day. Yesterday we started the project by squaring up the building by using batter boards. Now, for those of you who are doing it yourself like I am and have really never done this before, I did go online and learned about batter boards. Batter boards are little bitty cross boards that you place at a distance outside of the perimeter of your building. In other words, our building is 16 feet across the front and the back and 12 feet from front to back. And so we place batter boards at about 15 feet apart from the front to back side and about 18 feet apart from the side to side way of looking at things, so that we could tie strings between them. Then what we were able to do is we were able to move the strings around to adjust them so that we could square up the building and show where the precise corners of the building were going to be. Yesterday, after we started that process, we went around and marked the ground, and as you saw, I had a friend come in and drill the holes for me, which is a great time saver. If you've got somebody that's got one of these power augers, it's a great time saver. We had the holes punched in the ground. Now today we've got to restring the batter boards because obviously they got knocked out of whack yesterday while we were drilling the holes. We need to re-identify our corners, and then we're going to get set to mix some concrete, pour it in the bottom to create a little bit of a footer, and then to stick some posts in the ground. Now, as I said yesterday, if you're doing a do-it-yourself project, don't forget you need to square your building. I spoke with my helper yesterday, Travis, and I had him remind himself of what he had learned in geometry in school. A right triangle, that is a triangle where one side going one direction meets the other one at an exact 90 degrees. That's the corner of a square or a rectangle. That's how you square up a building. And the line that would connect those two is called the hypotenuse. You might remember that from your geometry. So in a right triangle, you have two sides and a hypotenuse. What that means is the cross piece that goes between the two 90-degree angles. If you're going to square up a building, you're going to use a little bit of that geometry. You might remember something called the Pythagorean theorem. I know it's not something you ever thought you'd ever have to remember, but guess what? It really comes in handy. Here's what the Pythagorean theorem says. It says the square of the two, if it's a right triangle, multiply that times itself and this times itself and add them together. The sum of the squares of the two sides equals the square of the hypotenuse. Sounds like a lot of work, doesn't it? Taking math and geometry and calculating the square of this and the square of this and add them together and then doing the square root of this. Forget it. You know what's easier? Lay out your one wall, whatever wall you want first, lay out a next wall, and then measure from corner to corner. As long as the corners are exactly the same measurement, you've got a square. Now you'll move your strings back and forth in either direction to square up your corners. And for those of you who are doing a do-it-yourself project, it is a little bit time consuming and it's a little bit frustrating. And you're not really sure which way to move the string. Do you move it to the left or the right or in or out? Play with it a little bit. It's all part of the process. Do it yourself, squaring up your building. Now we've got to go back and re-square it, so we'll show you kind of how that's done. Now, while I admit that this is the first time I've had to square up a building of this size and try and build something that I really kind of cared about. I mean, I've built a lot of things that weren't too important to me over the years. One of the things I did yesterday, knowing I was going to have to move my strings around today and re-square the building after we drilled the holes, is I made a little mark on each of the batter boards that identified where the string was supposed to lay. So in theory, if we marked it in the right place and the boards didn't shift overnight and the pull of the strings didn't make them get out of alignment, we ought to be pretty close to start. Well, all projects have to start somewhere. And what we started with was a string line that lined up with the front of this building behind me here, so that the front of our chicken coop would line up exactly with the front of that building. So the alignment would look good coming down the driveway. We had to start somewhere. We're starting with this hole. So we've got a string line on our batter boards that goes right over this corner, and that makes our first corner. We're going to be using 6x6 treated posts to set the chicken coop on, but we can't just stick a post in the ground. We've got to provide a footer. We've also got to pack it in. So we're going to be mixing up some concrete, pouring a little bit of footer. We're going to pour a footer in a bunch of these holes, tamp it down, and then we'll get busy setting the post. We'll show you how you can level up the post as you go. It's a little bit harder to do than you might expect. You could use just a spirit level, something on the sides of it, but they make a post level, pretty neat little tool. We'll talk about that in a minute. We bought bags of concrete, and of course you can buy bags of concrete 80 pounds or 40 pounds. I bought the 40 pounds. They're just a lot easier to move around. Not as much concrete, but they're easier to carry than trying to lug around an 80-pound bag. On each bag of concrete, you're going to see a recommendation in terms of how much water to put in. On our bags of concrete, it recommended 3 pints per bag, 3 pints of water. So I know that might sound like, oh, just pour the water in and mix it, but you know, these guys are professionals. They're scientists. They figured out exactly how much water needs to be in each bag, so who am I to argue with that? I'm just going to use an old mason jar that we use for mixing up chemicals around the farm. I know that there's 2 pints to a quart, and halfway up is a third pint. I'm going to mix up 2 bags at a time, so I'm going to put 6 pints of water in here, and then I'm going to make an extra quart of water in case I do need a little extra. Maybe it's a little bit too thick. I'll carry a quart of water with me, but I'm going to mix up 3 pints of water, or just pour 3 pints of water in this bucket and take it over to my mortar box. Well, the bag recommended 3 pints of water for each 40-pound bag of concrete, and it also said not to exceed 4.5 pints of water per 40-pound bag of concrete. I found that 3 pints was still too dry, so I like 4 pints. 4 pints for a 40-pound bag seems to work pretty good for me. Maybe it's just the temperature I'm working at. Maybe it's just me. I think I can work with this a little bit better this way. We're going to put some in the bottom of each of these holes. After you've got some concrete in the bottom of the hole to set up a little bit of a base for the post to sit on, I cut my post off so I wasn't working with a full 8-foot piece. That made it a little bit easier to manage. But now I'm going to put it in here. I'm going to line it up with my front line. Now don't forget, you've got to keep that front side flush with this front line of the building that you've laid out. You've got to keep the sideline flush with the sideline of the building you've laid out. And then you've got to also make sure the post is straight up and down. One of these post levels that goes on the corner is a really handy little tool. It's a little bit of finesse, but eventually you'll be able to wiggle the post around in the hole and get it to line up with both of your strings and all of it level. And then you can take a bag of concrete, dry concrete, and just start pouring around the post till you fill it up to the point where it's nice and solid. Pour a little water in behind it, and that ought to be good to go, because this post right now is about 30 inches below the ground level, well below frost in our area. So I think it's going to stay pretty solid. Well, as you can probably tell behind me now, I've got the 4 corner posts set in concrete. I've marked all the levels where the tops of my main beams are going to go. I still have a bunch of posts to set, and actually I have 5 more posts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 more posts to set. And then we can start constructing the floor. After that, things will go actually a little bit faster. This day today was a little bit slow. Had to get all the corners just right, had to get all the posts in the ground just right, and had to mix all the concrete. So the whole process was a little bit slow, but the chicken coop is coming along, and it won't be long. We'll have cackling and clucking going on out here, and it'll be winter before too long. It'll be a great time to continue this project, but then when spring rolls around, the chicks we're going to get right after Christmas should be just about ready for their brand new home. So stay with us. This is the part of the coop building that is a little bit of do-it-yourself, a little bit of celebration, and right now a whole lot of sore back. So thanks for watching. We'll be back with another episode of our new chicken coop when we continue the In with the New portion.
Goodbye, city life!